You just heard Sane Asylum and Blood Shower from Blind Illusions, the Sane Asylum album from 1988. This is the Thrash Extravaganza Part 4. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. Well done, my friend.
That was third try.
There was a lot of Insane Asylum-y stuff sort of going on there.
Who's running the asylum?
Yeah, I don't know, man. The inmates are running the asylum.
And maybe they're more sane than we are.
Yeah, exactly. More kind of high-fluting kind of conceptual stuff from Mark Biederman, who is the main draw of this band and still kind of the only original member still kicking to this day. The mastermind? Yeah, he was kind of the main guy, even on this record, really. He's the singer and the guitar player. He plays almost all the guitar in the whole record. But there are some other side guys on this band that have...
Two-thirds of Primus in here.
Added a little bit of legend to the status of this kind of offbeat record. And we'll get into that here in a second. But what you probably kind of heard there is, you've got like this sort of weird opening, intro, if you will, the title track that's kind of got like a psychedelic kind of Pink Floyd sort of loose kind of vibe that really opens up a thrash record in a way that I don't think any thrash record had really opened up by 88. Like this was sort of weird, offbeat. I don't know.
I mean, I don't think anything else has really come close to this since. Nothing else really sounds like this. There's like bits of it that sound like other things, but not in that kind of, like, it's kind of a singular album in thrash, I think.
Absolutely. Which is why
kind of a weird outlier.
Perfect for like the series that we're kind of doing. Just like Violence is kind of opening and what we did last week with Power and Pain. These are records that get like a lot of spotlight or sort of shined on. And unfortunately, Blind Illusion never really did a proper... not really a proper follow-up. They worked on a proper follow-up to it, but...
Discog says it's self-released, but nobody can find it.
I tried finding it. The follow-up was called The Medicine Show, and then it was like apparently released onto like YouTube, and some demos got shot that was called like the Psychedelic or I'm trying to remember. I have it written down somewhere. But it's hard to find, needless to say. So if anybody has it, I looked around for it because I was curious what it sounded like. Send it to us, email it to us, requiempodcast@gmail.com. I'm kind of curious to know what the follow-up to this sounded like, because like you said, where do you go from here after a weird record like this? And that's something.
Well, maybe later on we might find out.
Yeah, that's true. Indeed. And so then we went into the first kind of full-length tune, which is Blood Shower, which you just got done hearing there, and a lot of weird stuff going on here for a thrash song, I guess. We hear the standard kind of Nawabum riff that's sort of built around it. And there's a lot of Nawabum stuff sort of mixed into this. A lot of 70s Nawabum, especially more of the rock kind of stuff that's going on there. There's even a little bit of progressive stuff, obviously. The intricate thing that like the rhythm section is doing, and we'll get to who's in the band in a second. Mark already kind of gave it away a little, but as people probably know about the bass player, a guy you've perhaps heard of, Les Claypool, but he and the drummer, and the drummer's name was Mike Miner, are kind of doing this like interesting thing with that opening riff of Blood Shower that, who did it remind you of, Mark? Because I wrote the same thing in my notes separately.
Oh, Death.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I definitely had like a death, like
later Death.
Yeah, like human, symbolic, Sound of Perseverance kind of riff that's sort of going on. It's almost uplifting.
Yeah,
it's not as like dark and ominous as like the last couple episodes that we've done. Yeah, from like a, not that I know musical theory, but you can tell when something's a major chord or a minor chord, and this stuff seems much more on the major side, like triumphant a little bit. Yeah. And I think that's kind of again one of the weird anomalies of Blind Illusion is this is not. This is not a record about like hurting people. I mean, there's definitely stuff they're talking about. I mean, the name of the song is Blood Shower, but it's, the lyrics in it were like kind of predictive of like some of the current problems we're having in the Middle East today. Like, they're kind of talking about issues going on in the Middle East and stuff. Not to say that thrash bands weren't conscientious, because they were. They talked about the environment and politics and things like that. But
there's like kind of like factions, whereas like party versus, punk rock kind of thing.
Or like fantasy, like Slayer or something like that, you know, or like hyper realism, like which is what I sort of get out of like Dark Angel or Violence, where they're like going into like the darkest excesses of like the human mind, and you know, like serial killers and rape and abuse and that's some dark, heavy shit.
Like Slayer did that, but Slayer, everything was couched in a level of fantasy.
Yes, yeah. Slayer did like serial killers and stuff, you know. That kind of stuff.
Angel of Death.
Satan. Well, that's realistic.
Some real life shit.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so it's interesting that like it starts off with this sort of triumphant kind of different, almost like a prog death metal type riff, and then it kind of eventually locks into sort of a normal mid-pace kind of thrash riff. But you know, there's like weird stop-start parts in the chorus, and ultimately this is like kind of the first progressive thrash band that we've kind of featured on this series, you know. Dark Angel did some progressive things on their later records for sure, Leave Scars and Time Will Not Heal, but like Darkness Descends itself as like a singular thrash thing is not progressive.
And when you say progressive, this is more like what we think of progressive things to be, is like what they're bringing in, not like Dark Angel is more, it was like weird time signatures and stuff, but it's not progressive in the way this, like we see, like, you know, Rush and the more hard rock progressive stuff is what we kind of associate with that. At least I, of a certain age, associate with that. And I think they definitely kind of, because I never even listened to this band until 3 days ago.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and because I had certain expectations. I was like,
What did you think Blind Illusion was going to sound like? Just out of curiosity.
I thought it was going to just be like obnoxious and nothing I really gave a shit about.
Like a noodle fest or something like that, just kind of showing off.
Yeah, and it's not that at all.
No.
I bought the record today.
Yeah, as he did.
I bought an original copy.
Very cool. Yeah, and this is something I'm one of those weird guys that I probably picked this up when the Decibel Thrash special came out. What, 7 years ago? That
was their first special issue.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe longer than that, because after that I did all the covers.
I was going to say you did all the covers for Decibel.
Yeah.
The Doom, Black, Death,
and Heavy Metal.
Old School.
Yeah.
Is that it? And then the yearbook stuff that you've done for 95 and...
Yeah, but as far as covers, there's I think just the 4.
Yeah, 91 and 95, right? Were the 2 yearbook issues they've done? Yeah. No, and so they had like top 40 thrash kind of stuff on there, and I always look at those lists, and you know, it's different if it's like top 40 of that year because they haven't had time to age.
Yeah.
But like when it's something that's looking back on the past, you know, and thrash has definitely had plenty of time to age, and the cream rises to the top. I'm always kind of curious about like the things on those lists. I'm like, I don't fucking know what this is. Why don't I know what this is? And then like I did a little research. I'm like, oh shit, Larry Lalonde from, you know, Possessed and Primus and Les Claypool. I was like, this is...
Yeah, honestly, that's one of the reasons I didn't pick it up. But I do like the first 2 Primus records, I think.
So I think it's right in that wheelhouse. I mean, this is like before they record Frizzle Fry and fucking...
Sailing the Seas of Cheese?
Yeah, Sailing the Seas, yeah. I wanted to say Jerry was a race car driver. That's a song off
the single, yeah. But yeah, like the bass playing on the record is... It's not as dominant as you'd hear him doing on later stuff, but it's also recorded really weird. There's like almost like a wall of sound behind, like a super low frequency that you can't necessarily make out that much, but my dog did, and he kept like looking every time because you hear like a low rattle hum.
Yeah,
I had it fairly loud earlier, and just like because he'd be playing around the guitar and the drum lines, and then you hear it sounded almost like a Gene Simmons kind of like a bass, you know, thing or whatever, but it would be such a low register where it was almost just like ambience in the background. It was really bizarre.
Well, the stuff, I might as well bring it up now where we're talking about it because it's in a song we're going to play in the next set. But like Mark, the band leader, and I'll get into the history here in a second, but he had kind of suggested or Les had been pulled away from being in Blind Illusion in the early years because they kind of grew up together alongside Kirk Hammett. The 3 of them kind of went, I think, to the same high school or middle school or played in some of the same areas, hung out. And Mark is the guy that got Les to pick up a bass, first of all, because originally Les wanted Mark and Kirk to teach him guitar lessons. And they're like, there's already too many fucking guitarists in San Francisco. We need good bass players. So like he encouraged him to do it. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody talked to Les and was like, metal bass, if you want to know bass, you got to learn jazz bass. Mm-hmm. And he went off and kind of took jazz lessons, and he kind of came back into the fold around like 87 when they're putting these songs kind of together. And Mark heard Les doing like jazz exercises because he was still taking lessons with this, like, I can't remember who the guy was, but some expert, bass player of some sort in that area. And he was like, holy shit, what's that? He's like, I don't know, these are just my fucking exercises. Like the story of Ted Templeton going and seeing Van Halen and watching like Eddie Van Halen like warm up.
Yeah.
With like, and he was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you need to record that. And Eddie's like, this is just my warm up exercises. They're like, yeah, but that's fucking awesome. So in Death Noise, which we'll play, that 4-minute intro that happens in Death Noise before the song kind of kicks into, the other 3 minutes, a lot of the things that he's doing on there are the things that Mark heard Les doing in the warm-ups. It was like, hey, dude, just fuck around, put it in the song. It'll be cool.
Most of the thrash bassists that we remember are all more jazz players, like DiGiorgio, Cliff. Yeah. Like, they're not traditional, like, the last great traditional bass player, like, Steve Harris, and then, like Dee Dee Verney's he's not a great bass player, but he's got a really good sensibility. I wouldn't call him like a...
He's not technical.
He's not technical, but his feel is...
His feel's awesome.
Without him in the band wouldn't be shit.
Yeah. He's like what Steve Harris is to Maiden.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ways. Yeah. And so Les is like obviously an essential element to what gives like the Sane Asylum some uniqueness, but I also like the restraint too. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of restraint, here.
I don't know how much of that is the production adding to that as well, as far as like I would like it to be... My instinct is to push it in the mix a little more. Yeah. But I think that would be probably not a good thing.
It would be kind of showy. It'd be more primacy, obviously, in some capacity. Although
it wouldn't suit the album as well as it is now.
Yeah. I mean,
which we didn't talk about who's the ghost producer of this album.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that because I'll get to the childhood in a second. But I guess like my last thought about like kind of what you're saying is, I guess one of the big criticisms of this record, if you as I did research, is the production. Mm-hmm. What do you think on it? I mean, you were kind of talking about the wall of noise. You were sort of saying there's some weirdness to it.
I kind of like how unconventional it is, and then figuring out like they didn't make the decisions that I would have made as a listener of this type of music. Yeah, I probably would have pushed the vocals down a little bit, guitar and bass. I probably would put it a little higher in the mix, but they decided for whatever reason not to do that. I think there almost seems like there's a weird, like a phase issue or something where like stuff isn't being, like the frequencies kind of go a little bonkers in the recording or something. But like because the bass sounds like bass sometimes and then just is like background noise at other times.
Sure. I'm looking.
I don't know how they recorded it either, but
I'm trying to remember who the. Well, so the producer is, I'm looking to see if they talk about who did like the...
engineering or something?
Yeah, it was recorded at Hyde Street Studio A, mixed at Alpha and Omega Studios. I think those are all kind of local San Francisco kind of stuff. It was put out by Combat originally. Road Racers, the version I sort of have, the Metal Mine kind of Roadrunner type thing that they were doing. But Kirk Hammett of Metallica produced the album. He doesn't get any credit on there, and the story goes is that so Kirk and Mark grew up together, and they definitely went to high school together. I don't know where Les fits into that equation, but a lot of the guys in that Murder in the Front Row documentary like kind of all came up together, and they even talked about how they had like guitar club. Do you remember that little moment in the yearbook? And so Mark's in that picture, Kirk's in that picture, so like they definitely were like in the same club together in high school and stuff, and so they go way back to the 70s. And so, in fact, Blind Illusion technically formed in 79, I think is what Mark said. And I listened to a really cool YouTube interview with him and Steve Zetro from Exodus, kind of interviewing people, and Mark's on there. And Mark's kind of just going through the whole past, and it's a lot. And so I'll kind of give you the real short version, but essentially, yeah, they got together in like 79.
Was that like junior high school?
Junior high, maybe early high school, but yeah, they were young. So like, they were, playing this kind of stuff in the early years. And, Mark's the only guy that kind of, merged out of that. All the original other guys kind of went on and did some kind of different things and left music or went to other bands. But I mean, they were putting out demos. If you look on, Metallium as early as 81.
Okay.
The big first demo that they sort of put out, originally they kind of started, just kind of playing like Blue Oyster Cult and Hawkwind. So they were kind of into like psychedelic music, thrash metal, and like a little bit of progressive. Because like Hawkwind kind of toes that line, right? Between some of those kind of elements. And even BOC is not
really a lot of that stuff has those kind of tendencies.
Exactly. And then by the early 80s, they started kind of absorbing like Angel Witch, Judas Priest, I even like some early Fate's Warning stuff, like Awaken the Guardian. You hear a lot of that in some of the stuff that they're doing. They put out a demo in 83 called Trilogy of Terror, and that was like the first one where they were really like kind of starting to get their shit together. Again, I don't know who's on. I should probably have looked which band members were in those kind of demos and stuff. I'm curious if Les was on any of them. But the big one is the one that they put out in 85, which is called... Oh, that was the Trilogy of Terror one. I don't know why I thought that was 83. Blood Shower, which is the song we just heard, the original demo for that is in 86. And so I think that's when some of the songs that are on Sane Asylum kind of start to formulate a little bit. If you look, so what...
Kamikaze's on their 81 demo.
Is it? Yeah. So some of it's like kind of like redone. They had a guy in the band that he talked a lot about... Victor Griffith was the original drummer. They were like Spinal Tap with drummers too, I think.
Though even the 83 demo has Death Noise on it.
Yeah.
So that's why this is one of those records where all this stuff has been cultivated over the previous 8
and that's
years.
That's why I think it doesn't seem like all the songs are necessarily thrash. Because it's almost like it was being written in different eras of metal. So, like, it's written partially in traditional metal, partially in Nawabum, partially in thrash.
Yeah.
And yet Mark is also, like, a 70s, like, stoner dude. Like, he talked a lot in the interview about being lots and lots and lots and lots of marijuana, it seems, which is fine. And so he's kind of got some of those kind of weird tendencies where he kind of has, like, a 60s, 70s rock kind of Aerosmith kind of attitude. I even hear some like weird 70s Aerosmith riffs every so often built into it. And you wouldn't hear that in a Metallica record. You wouldn't hear that in a Slayer. It's just not there.
No.
And so Blind Illusion has these like weird elements that just make it a little bit different, I guess. And so then Les comes back. He had already been playing with Primus by the time he kind of rejoins the band at a certain point. And then Larry joins when Possessed breaks up. So those of you might know that Larry Lalonde was a guitar player with Possessed.
And when he was like 14 or something.
Yeah, and Possessed has all kinds of weird kind of connections into it too, because the Eyes of Horror EP, which I think is the last thing Possessed did before they broke up, was produced by Joe Satriani.
Yeah.
And Joe Satriani was Kirk Hammett's guitar teacher. And so like I think the San Francisco metal scene was way more intimate than I think we think it is. I mean, San Francisco is not... It's a big town, but it's not like a metropolis kind of thing.
If you've been to San Francisco, it's not... I mean, there's a lot of people living there, but it has more of a small, towny kind of vibe to it. Like especially if you were in a very specific scene, you would know everybody. Like friends of mine that were in the punk scene there, like you knew everybody.
Absolutely. Yep.
Just makes sense. This says that Claypool was in 79 to 81 and then 86 to 88.
So there you go. So he was with them at the very beginning when Mark started the band. Because like I said, I thought those guys all went to high school with Hammett. I don't know why Hammett wasn't in the band. I mean, I know Hammett was in Exodus and then got pulled to Metallica.
Yeah.
Maybe Hammett, Mark's his own guitar guy, so why... I guess you don't need another guitar guy. Right.
Well, they said there's already too many guitars.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and the funny thing about this record is he pulls Larry in at the very end, but Larry's only on 3 songs, and even then,
does he just do leads or
he only does solos?
Okay.
So Mark's writing most of the music. He's singing. He's doing all the guitar recording and stuff like that. Even to the point where, like, Les was already starting to do Primus, and so when they go on tour for the Sane Asylum, Les isn't playing with them, but Les actually trained his understudy to do, that kind of stuff. Excuse me. Ooh. It's not COVID.
Blind illusion.
It's not a COVID sneeze.
I don't know if you've ever, we are 6 feet apart on our huge
we are
table right now.
We're very much 6 feet apart.
But if you've ever looked at the complete lineup on Metal Archives,
All the band members?
Holy shit.
I know. I told you it's like Spinal Tap.
It's like
shit.
30.
Yeah, it's like Spinal Tap shit. It's hilarious. So, yeah. So, I mean, really the main thing, if you want to know about Blind Illusion, I know that Les and Larry get a lot of the attention, especially for Sane Asylum, but that's really selling like Mark Biederman short, because he's pretty amazing on this record when you consider that he's writing everything, that he's playing all the guitar minus a couple leads, he's singing.
He's got a really unique vocal
his
delivery
vocals
too.
are probably another area where, and we've talked about that on Violence and on Dark Angel.
It kind of fits in that school though too, where it's just this kind of like iconoclast, like nobody sounds like this dude really.
Yeah.
And like the way he decides to phrase stuff is kind of bonkers, but it all makes sense.
Sure.
Which maybe just because this is this one like snapshot in time, if they would have like progressed more, who knows if it would have worked. But in this one instance, everything works really well.
So one thing that's interesting about Mark, as I'm kind of thinking about it, because we're talking about his voice, I forgot, I wrote this down, a cool little factoid from the interview. He and Kirk met in Mr. B's class. So like they just remember it. It's like, probably what class did you and Chris like kind of connect in? Because I know you guys have talked about it.
English class.
There you go. So it's like, that's it. You know what I mean? So like, even though Kirk's not in the band, I mean, Kirk's a big part of this scene and things like that. So it's kind of interesting that they still like, oh yeah, Mr. B's class. That's where me and Kirk found out we were metalheads, Because I doubt people back then, like, you knew who the metalheads were. You were like singular.
Yeah. Yeah, it was slightly different in the early 90s, but because the metal wasn't, there's so many different
hair
factions.
Metal, yeah.
There was classic rock, there was all that stuff, but we were like the death metal guys.
Mm-hmm. The death metal guys.
Yeah.
So cool thing about Mark too, coming out of his 70s kind of drug haze, he was into Jethro Tull and Rush and some of that kind of stuff. He loved kind of jammy music and stuff, but he was obsessed with Bruce Lee.
As was a lot of people.
A lot of people in the 70s. Yeah, Bruce Lee, I think of Mark Wahlberg and Boogie Nights. Like,
it was a philosophy. It wasn't just like
be water.
Just a movie star. Yeah.
To be water. And he said, and this is the quote he gave to Zetro, he said he tried to play his guitar like a Bruce Lee kung fu wizard. And that's how he approached everything he ever did on guitar. So like all the proggy technical flashy stuff that he's doing is just like him like thinking of playing the guitar like Bruce Lee would play guitar.
Doing the poses,
who fucking knows?
The Tai Chi.
If for those of you who are obviously listening at home, I was posing some things out there.
We'll never be doing a video version of our
exactly.
show.
So it's interesting, So like there's this great like quote from Jeff Wagner in his 4 Decades of Progressive Heavy Metal book, Mean Deviation, and Wagner says, even the most intense songs like Vengeance is Mine and Smash the Crystal were swirled with the essence of pot smoke and incense.
I get that.
And you can kind of feel that over the record, right?
Yeah.
It's left of center. It's not like a normal thrash record, which, is what makes it kind of extra special. They didn't do a full... Okay, so Psychedelic Symphony, that's what I was trying to remember. That's what they tried to put out the second record as. And then the real second record didn't get put out till 2010, Demon Master.
Okay.
And that has a 24% on Metal Archives. So that must have been some real butthurt Blind Illusion fans.
How many people reviewed it, though?
I don't know, 3. But again...
3 kids that are 20 years old and think it's shit.
22 years later. What do you expect from a 22-year later follow-up? A lot's
Surgical
changed.
Steel. 17 years.
Sure. But those guys still played in other bands and like were still like in the metal scene. I think Mark
Walker wasn't. He was doing fucking country records.
Well, he did Carcass Country. But he was on, wasn't he like a guest on some things?
He was guest on like Napalm's The Code. What is it? The Code is Red.
Yeah,
Through the Code.
I mean,
like
he wasn't like completely removed. I think what happened to Mark is not to get too much kind of into it. Well, I'll save it for the next set. I'll say it because that's more like what happens after Sane Asylum. But I just think that he was a guy that kind of drifted from the metal scene a little bit during the 90s and maybe kind of perhaps found his footing again and probably was a different person. He wasn't into the same stuff.
How you'd feel if your friends, one of them was in Metallica and one's in Primus, and you're
still
twiddling your thumbs.
You're still that guy.
Yeah,
I'm sure
that's fucking tough, man.
It is tough. I think there's some suggestions that he was getting like really paranoid after this record.
Had a little bit of a psychotic break.
I think he was having some issues. Yeah. I don't know. I know he's into, smoking pot, but it didn't sound like Zetro brought up the drugs that people were doing back then with, I think, allusions to cocaine. And Mark made a point of saying, I was doing a lot of dope, but I never touched the other stuff. So, which is good. But maybe he just kind of got that like weird.
Well, good thing you didn't try weed now. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Exactly. Here's another cool thing. Again, this band has so many fucking weird connections, but one of their original or one of their old vocalists went on to become the singer for Heathen.
Oh, shit.
And another one of their former vocalists went on and was one of the singers, I'm not sure in which order, of Metal Church. So like they were like this weird feeder ground.
They're like the malevolent creation of thrash.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, they're like the minor leagues. People just keep getting like drafted from them to sort of other bands and stuff. So they have a lot of weird connections with that. And you brought up Cliff Burton before, and I think it'd be remiss that Cliff and Mark were pretty good friends too. And in fact, before Cliff died, Cliff loved Blind Illusion because he loved that. Because Cliff was not like a traditional thrash guy, right? Mm-hmm. Cliff was kind of into 70s rock, and
he was wearing bell bottoms and shit
like that. Yeah. So they had aspirations. They were talking about putting together a southern rock band, him and Cliff, which is kind of sad,
Yeah.
So I mean, Mark has like a aversion to working with like super fucking talented bass players. Apparently, he's not threatened by any of that stuff.
Yeah,
so, which is cool.
Steve DiGiorgio never played in Blind Illusion, though. Huh?
Were Sadists San Francisco or were they L.A.?
I thought they're San Francisco area.
Are they San Francisco?
I think it's like outside of, just north of it.
Yeah,
like
they must have come
Burbs
later
era, but
yeah. I mean, I know they did come later, but they just weren't They weren't mentioned in that Murder in the Front Row.
No, I think they were a weird band because they started in '84.
Are they San Francisco?
Yeah, Antioch.
Okay,
it's like just inside the bay there.
Bay. Yeah,
but yeah, they were doing demos. Yeah, the first demo was '86. So
what's their debut? Illusions, '88.
'88. Yep,
yeah, that's what I thought.
I need to go back and listen. I've not given them much of a
Sadist
shake.
Is like,
since the '90s.
I feel like Sadist for me is kind of what you used to think about Dark Angel.
Okay.
Like it's like I have Sadist, I own those records, and I'll put them on, and it's like a blur, and I'm like I don't know what to like grab onto. I love DiGiorgio, but
yeah, is he as fully formed in Sadist though?
I feel like not so much on Illusions, but the two records that follow are pretty solid.
Swallowed in Black and
that's probably my favorite.
Vision
one.
of Misery.
Yeah, I think Swallowed in Black seems to be like the one that I kind of dug the most. But I think I like all three now more than, my brain would be kind of set right on them. So, but yeah, so let's get into it. Let's get into the sort of the weird stuff here because, Blood Shower is, pretty straightforward, but these next couple songs I think are going to show you a different side, especially if you're like Mark and you haven't listened to this until 30 minutes ago when we started this. I'm trying, you were 3 days ago.
Yeah, just a couple days ago.
The listeners who have started this episode, they're about 30, 35 minutes in.
Yeah.
They maybe are new to Blind
29:35.
See, yeah. I felt the 30 minutes. I was feeling. So we got a trio of tunes, and we got kind of two longer ones, longish ones. Vengeance is Mine, which is probably like one of the heavier songs on the record. I mean, it's not as heavy as some of the things we've done the previous couple Thrash episodes, but it's still pretty heavy. This is one of the 3 songs that Larry solos on. He's on Vengeance is Mine here. All right.
I think it might be the best, the most immediate song on the record.
It really, like, there's this little intro, and then, like, it gets into I call it a grinding testament riff. It's like very much a Bay Area iconic kind of riff going here, you know. Killer chorus, really dig it. The middle section, fucking cool, proggy kind of feeling to it with some really interesting choices that the Les and Mike, the drummer, are kind of making. They're kind of playing with a lot of tempos.
There's some weird like stereo panning shit.
Yeah,
I don't know if you noticed that too. It's like going back. Yeah, I don't know what that was. The productions. I don't know if it's amateurish, but whatever. It just works.
Yeah,
in the context of this record,
it's almost like Kirk coming at it as a musician and not as like a producer.
Yeah,
you know, and probably Mark was like, "This is what I want," and like Mark's vision of it was probably really strange. Like, I want it to be like a Blue Oyster Cult and this, you know, like that. Okay, you know.
But also, like, panning used to be a big deal.
Yeah.
Like when you just, you know, you start a riff on one side and you bring it to the other. Like that was, you know, stereo sound at this time was kind of, most people were probably still listening to like mono systems when this probably came out. Like my first car stereo was a mono speaker. So, but then when you got like the good boom box, you're like, oh shit. Stereo, here's some Slayer where it starts, and then over, like, oh shit.
Yep. The next layer begins. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I had a boombox. I didn't really get a good stereo until like 94.
I didn't have I had a passable one, but I didn't have a good one until 99, 2000.
Until college.
Which is this stereo I still have.
There you go.
I have the same speakers I've got, but the new component.
That was like a big thing, like with Grindcore Coon and I, like we were kind of like trying to like up our game a little bit.
Yeah.
So he got like a component system for Christmas, and I got one, and we were just kind of like, it wasn't
That's
like, it was a
game,
friendly
man.
Rivalry, but it was just like, it was time for the big leagues. We were in high school. We were buying a lot of records.
Yeah. You're like, it's just like you start getting into certain shit, you got to get better stuff to play it on too.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to hear, because I remember hearing like the guy I got this from, like the audiophile jazz dudes, when you play, it was like listening to new like records for the first time all over again, which is kind of like watching, like when you got your first DVD player and you throw on something like, oh shit, I've only seen this on VHS and now it's twice the resolution.
Badly. Yeah, or even it was like the
widescreen
weird edits. Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference in like watching like 2001: Space Odyssey on a 30-inch TV and like seeing it in the theater. You're just like, holy fuck, what, you know? It's like a totally different vision. So, but yeah, so there's like it's kind of it's just an odd tune, you know. There's like a weird middle section that I think people will really dig with Vengeance is Mine. And speaking of odd tunes, we get one of, I think, 2 of the more unique songs in the whole fucking record, which is Death Noise, the aforementioned song where to me, it's the musical highlight of the whole record. This is another of the songs that Larry is playing. I think it's his best solo is in this record. He's kind of on fire here. This is full prog thrash here. If you were to tell me this is what progressive thrash sounds like, I'd say, all right, Death Noise.
Well, it starts out with a fucking Angel Witch riff.
Yeah.
Like blatant Angel riff. I would have not known that until, like, if I heard this back in the day, I'd no fucking clue. But now it's like I'm more familiar with Angel Witch than these guys.
For sure, yeah. And it, like I said, Angel Witch was one of the gateway bands to get him out of like 70s rock into like no album.
Yeah.
He didn't mention Maiden. He didn't mention Priest. He mentioned Angel Witch. You know what I mean?
Angel Witch, they definitely have more that 70s vibe than Maiden did.
Kind of like, to me, like Angel Witch and Diamond Head are kind of in a similar category almost.
Yeah, I would say that's, makes sense. I would even say the first couple Def Leppard records.
Yeah.
Throw more, they feel more like, or even High and Dry, like more of like 70s rock than they were barely in the new album thing really, but
yeah.
But yeah, they definitely stood out as being, seem different in retrospect. It seems that's probably why.
Yeah, I definitely there. And basically the opening 4 minutes, as I alluded to before, is just, it just destroys. And, what Les is doing with metal bass, it kind of reminds me the way it's recorded. And we were talking about Dan Swano before. I think in the previous episode, Dan Swano comes up in like every episode lately that we recorded. Yeah. We went on a whole like Edge of Sanity tangent with Chris. I remember recently, but like to me, like the way that they're recording Les and some of the like the way his bass is coming through, it reminds me of the way that Swano produced the bass on those first 2 Opeth records on Orchid and Morning Rise, where it comes out in a really pronounced organic way. It doesn't overwhelm, but it's like it makes its presence, it's almost got its own pocket that it's allowed to sort of like play with, its own sandbox without like interfering with the rest of the music.
I think Swano is kind of, I mean, he grew up on 70s progressive rock big time, and I think looking back it seems like a lot of his aesthetics to recording death metal was a 70s progressive rock aesthetic.
Which is probably
why it sounds so interesting.
I love those first couple Opeths. I mean, Brave Murder Day.
Yeah.
Like, all the stuff that he was doing. Those are some of my favorite metal records of the extreme metal, like of all time. You know, I would have loved to have seen like what he did with like Anathema or Bride. You know, bands that had some. I mean, Anathema had more roots in like progressive kind of rock and stuff like that. But just to see what he could kind of get out of that would be kind of interesting.
Because he was pretty prolific for so long. Now he's more of like a mastering guy.
Sure. You know, he did one of the Greek bands we played on Thorns I Lay. He did those last couple, which I thought was really
Did he do
odd.
Storm in the Lightsbane?
Yeah, because he's the one that screams on Where Dead Angels Lie.
Yeah.
So.
Because that's a weird one too.
Yeah.
That's almost more of like a Peter Tatgren production. Like thinking back,
almost predicts like what he's going to start to do on like an Abyss Studios or something like that.
Yeah,
I could see that. Yep.
But that's for another show.
Yeah, but to me, what's cool about this tune, Death Noise, is like I think this. You know, we talked about what a weird character Mark is, and if you look at photos of the guy, he's
full on skullet. Like I respect.
Kind of looks like Uli John Roth, but like the American version of him or something like that. You know, he's got this.
I mean, he looks like a hippie. He looks like if Cliff Burton was still alive. Is probably what he looked like.
And Uli John Roth kind of has that hippie vibe, right, with the headband and some of that kind of shit that he's sort of doing.
Kind of Hendrix worship outfits and stuff.
For sure. And I think Mark's kind of like a leftover of like the 70s that just happens to be doing like 80s trends here.
Yeah.
But like to me, all of Mark's bizarre ideas like come to fruition on a song like this. It's kind of perfect. And one other thing that I'll say before I stop talking about Death Noise and we kind of get into our set here is after you get out of this kind of cool, you know, opening salvo and you really get into the song, there's some cool like Eddie Van Halen style like string sweeps that he does. And that's all I can say is it's like it reminds me of old Van Halen like string sweeps. I think it's what Eddie does on Fire, which is from the debut record, and that's like one of fucking killer tunes. And it's like weird that he's like, I've just never heard it in a thrash song before. So we'll listen to it in this break, so Mark kind of knows what I'm kind of pointing out and alluding to. But let's get into it. We've got Vengeance Is Mine. We've got Death Noise, kind of one of the epic centerpieces of the whole record. And then we'll end with Smash the Crystal, which is another Larry solo. So we got the 3 Larry songs all in a row for you Larry Lalonde fans. was Smash the Crystal, Death Noise, and Vengeance is Mine. Did you have notes, or did you? I don't know if you went song by song. Anything to mention more about Vengeance is Mine or Death Noise? I know I kind of...
I put in a couple comments. The previous thing about the Angel Witch
gotcha
references, the beginning of... What the fuck record was that? Is Death Noise, is that the one that starts out with it sounds like a Lucifer's Friend riff?
It might be. Because that's the one where it takes like 4 minutes to like go into stuff. It's just like 4 minutes of like noodling and playing around, and
yeah,
it's like I said, it's like full prog. So that might be the one you're thinking of. Lucifer's Friend, eh? That's a cool grab.
Maybe it's Vengeance is Mine at the very beginning of it.
It could be
where it has that. I wonder if we can.
I'm trying to think what it is. Yeah, there's like a little intro before like the kind of grinding Testament sort of riff sort of comes in. So I bet that might be what you might be thinking of. So, are you queuing it up?
I was just going to see if I could... Man, there's a lot of songs called Vengeance is Mine.
Yeah.
Alice Cooper, Morbid Angel, Sentenced.
Oh, I forgot. Vengeance is Mine from Morbid Angel. That's on Covenant, is it?
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
I think.
Different than this version.
Okay.
So while...
Yeah, that reminds me of a Lucifer's Friend riff.
It's a Lucifer's Friend, and as you played that, it reminds me of like a modern Opeth riff too.
Yeah.
It's kind of got that like just
that was like the first.
warm...
Yeah, that's why I like Vengeance is Mine so much, because it's all this shit happening, but then this weird like 70s fucking prog rock riff.
Yeah.
Thrown in there, and then it doesn't last long, but it comes. Sure. It's reprised a little bit later on. But
forgot to mention lyrically, that song kind of connected back to Blood Shower. The whole song's about like a war for oil. Which is interesting in 88. Yeah. That like predates Desert Storm, you know. So
well, it's cool that they can have. It sounds like a bad later Slayer song title.
Yeah,
but then actually has some substance.
But it's really kind of yeah, exactly.
The shower of oil of
now
blood.
Smash the Crystal, on the other hand, I think it's like about fortune telling, and like I think it's an anti-fortune telling kind of song.
Man, did he get duped by?
I guess yeah,
by a tarot reader.
I mean, San Francisco's full of some weird fucking. People, right?
He probably, grew up. He probably went to the Hate a couple times.
Lots of hippies trying to rip him off and shit.
Yeah.
Mystical bullshit. But you got a lot of cool, like, Les doing some, like, kind of his funk stuff on Smash the Crystal. It's one of the most straightforward sort of thrash songs on the record, but Les is, like, kind of allowed to have a pretty cool, like, playground here.
Yeah, for sure.
And for me, like, Mark is kind of this like virtuoso guitar player that doesn't get like a lot of credit, but he's fucking great on this song.
Yeah.
Like he's
whole record.
I mean, the opening of that song is this weird, cool, like back and forth conversation between the guitar and the bass, which is like, if you got Les Claypool and you got Mark being why not? Fuck it, So kind of what happens to these guys afterwards is Biederman he was the full vision of the band, by the way. He did like the cover concept, the layout concept. He didn't paint the cover, but like all the weird, like, did you see like the logo texting like inside? Like it's kind of like weirdly hand drawn. It's almost like a underground comic book looking type stuff.
Very San Francisco.
Yeah, which would be
Crumb
Crumb and some of that stuff going on there. But I didn't know if you had like a take on like the visual design. I know you were looking at my CD earlier.
It didn't feel like a threat. I don't think that's another reason why I didn't really like the band, or I didn't think I liked the band, is because it didn't look like a thrash cover. The name, it sounded like Blind Faith or something. It didn't seem like a
Blind Melon.
That
all the blinds.
Probably had some yeah.
When you're in the record store, you got the blind category, and
yeah, blind melon, Jesus.
Hey, you know what? I don't hate Blind Melon. I hate the song on the radio, but they had some really good deep cuts. Actually, they have a song called Galaxy. It's fucking dynamite. It's on their second record.
Maybe we'll do a blind melon.
There you go.
Sometime.
We'll do a blind show. Yeah, bring some Steve Winwood and Clapton in for Blind Faith.
A little Corrosion of Conformity.
Yes, I could talk a lot about fucking COC Blind.
That's the first COC record I heard.
That's a big one that was a gateway for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. Vote with a Bullet, bro.
91, 92, 92.
How current now,
Vote with a Bullet. Indeed. Actually, we're not encouraging revolution, so, go
Yeah, we're voting with a
Metaphorical.
establishment candidate.
Yes.
That the only reason he won is because everybody else was so bad.
Yes. The lesser of evils or something like that. I don't know.
Creepy uncle that might have touched you weird, but at least he didn't kill your dog.
Hey, creepy uncle that might have touched you reminds me of one of my favorite Patton Oswalt characters, which is
Give me all the ham.
Uncle Touchy's Naked Puzzle Basement.
Oof.
And he's like, you'll laugh and you'll cry and you won't wear a shirt. Like he does this whole like singing part. Yeah.
Well, Sleepy Joe has been in his basement for most of this year.
There you go.
Prepping for his big comeback.
See, when I think of Sleepy Joe, and I know this is me only laughing, there's my favorite Rick and Morty episode features this character called Sleepy Gary that has a gay relationship with the main character in the episode because everybody's suffering from amnesia. Mm-hmm. It's called Total Recall. And it's basically like Inception. People it's like you don't know what's real and what's not real. And this guy, he just wears like a fucking Ebenezer Scrooge kind of stocking hat, like sleeping hat, in pajamas.
Yeah, tuck in for your long winter's nap, kind of.
Yeah, Sleepy Gary. So Sleepy Joe, Sleepy Gary. There you go. So, anyways, back to Blind. Yeah, I almost
Blind
said
Guardian.
back to Blind Melon. Blind Guardian. Oh yeah, they're in the blind section too. There's a lot of good blind things happening.
Yeah. Stevie Wonder.
I can't follow that.
Blind Willie Dixon. McTell.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of the name.
Blind Willie. There is Willie Dixon.
Willie Dixon's not the blind guy, but yeah.
But yeah, so Niederman, basically according to Wagner, in his book, he was kind of getting increasingly paranoid after this record. And he was, trying to like formulate the follow-up to this, which he was going to title The Medicine Show. And there was somebody that influenced him, like somebody that he was talking to a bunch that really got him thinking a lot about the kind of medical industry and like the power that doctors had, that they were almost more powerful than politicians in terms of like their power over like prescription drugs and basically like just sort of numbing like society with like their it's kind of
like
a cool
post-carcass
concept.
idea.
Yeah, for sure. Or it's very prescient to like sort of the prescription drug problems we kind of see today and some of that kind of stuff. He was going to have Sandy Pearlman from BOC, from Blue Oyster Cult fame, produce it. But they only really ended up kind of putting together a few demo tunes that were produced in '89. They ended up coming out in some capacity as the Psychedelic Symphony, not the Medicine Show. And the whole Sandy Pearlman connection is that Mark Biederman was like invited in, I think through Joe Satriani, because I think they were bringing in a bunch of like really talented guitar players to play on this kind of like guitar symphony song on a late 80s Blue Oyster Cult record that I don't know.
Yeah.
But, I kind of lost track of them after like 80,
Yeah, that's most people.
But like, so he kind of got to know Sandy Pearlman. Sandy Pearlman was like really impressed with his skills and stuff. But I think Mark's, I don't know if it's his sanity or what was going on, but he was definitely having some, I think, mental health kind of issues perhaps. And so he just couldn't put the pieces together. And so that album really just never quite kind of formulated and stuff. And there is sort of a quote from, let's see. It says, the promise of the grand future beyond the Sane Asylum never came to pass, as Blind Illusion disappeared after some scant touring behind the album. Two key members of the group left. Larry Lalonde joined Les Claypool and Primus, and the band soon went from popular Bay Area club oddity to huge concert hall draw. Primus's kinetic left field classic, 1990's Frizzle Fry, kicked off a frenzied period of activity, leading to international acclaim. By 1994, Primus were opening arena shows for Rush, while Mark Biederman had all but disappeared into Syd Barrett-like fashion. After a sabbatical to China to further his martial arts training, Biederman put together another Blind Illusion lineup, this time a power trio and demoed material that was radically different than the Sane Asylum, bringing the band full circle to the psych rock sound they'd forged in 1979. And that's probably where we kind of lead to in this kind of last thing that we're going to sort of end with, which we wanted to play one more song from the Sane Asylum, and I think this is probably the most proggy song. Like Death Noise was like prog thrash, but like Metamorphosis of a Monster has like more of a jammy quality. It's a weird song. I mean, he brings in I called it the 2112 of the record. It's like got that sort of like style of like the song itself, 2112. It kind of has like a little bit of that quality to it. It's layered. It's got like some psychedelic things. There's like a
Cannibal
weird
Corpse riff in it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He brings in a children's choir.
Yeah.
There's like keyboards in it too. There's like this weird like kind of stop-start kind of thing that sort of happens. I wrote it's labyrinthian and phantasmagoric. And despite the poor production, it has still this like really cool like sonic wallop to it that I think is really interesting.
Yeah, there's like I put in my notes that there's like some cynic-ness in there and like some Dave Mustaine vocals.
Okay, I can
like
see
as far
that.
as the phrasing was concerned.
And speaking of the vocals, one thing that's really interesting, the whole song is as Wagner alludes to in his book, it's a multi-part epic ode to Mother Earth, in which Biederman conducted a choir of children shown wailing their little hearts out on the inner sleeve of the LP. And he says, ending this album in a very atypical way for an atypical band, he said the lyrics hauntingly narrated a scene set by hypnotic rhythm and snaky bass lines. So these are the final closing words of the whole record. One day the whales will walk the earth. Hunter will become hunted. Mammoth will unearth itself from the tomb of hibernation. He will sprout wings and fly. Man will be consumed by fire, then condemned to the sea, burning eternally with salty water in the lung, reborn, reformed. The humble will adorn a new way without treachery or scorn.
So did he watch The Voyage Home from Star Trek and then
I think he was really
prophetically talking
by,
about Hunter
Star
Biden
Trek
being
4.
the hunted?
Yeah, that could be it. That could be it. Yeah. So it's that's like not your average thrash lyrics either. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean that's has more I think deep thought than most stuff.
Yeah,
did,
it's pretty contemplative,
and that's the stuff that doesn't normally come from somebody who's completely fine in the world.
Yeah, and like I said, Wagner alludes to Syd Barrett like journeys kind of on the way and stuff.
Well, and some him and like Peter Green, some of these people that are operating on a different level than the rest of us might not seem like they've got all the trappings of what should be like a successful career, but they're just too far left field to ever make it happen.
Well, I guess too he was a Christian Scientist, which is
he doesn't believe in science. He doesn't believe in normal health. So he's like new agey shit.
Which is, maybe he was starting to get into that, because here's the quote where he was interviewed by a fanzine called Anti-Poser, and he's talking about the follow-up. And he says, instead of striking out politicians, it's going after doctors because they have a license to kill. They have all the drugs, the pure shit. A lot of doctors are set up. They have their degrees in chemistry in their little factories.
Interesting.
So he's definitely got a focus. He's, that's different than
he's trying to justify his beliefs.
Yeah.
Like most people that have far
for sure
weird beliefs, I guess.
Yep. And by the way, that Blue Oyster Cult record was called Imaginos. And he was going to join other guest guitarists, including Joe Satriani and The Doors' Robbie Krieger. So I haven't heard it or anything, so I couldn't tell you much about it, but it is a pretty far out,
Yeah.
for sure. So we wanted to do two things here. We wanted to end with Metamorphosis of a Monster, which is kind of concludes the Sane Asylum. And then Mark and I thought it'd be kind of cool just for this guy just to give a little bit more credence, because he's still out there doing stuff. And he's recently put together another band.
This is 2020, right?
2020. Just got released like a month ago. I think September is when they put this out. And they got a new song. I didn't write down, I apologize, I didn't write down the new album. But the name of the song is called Straight as the Crowbar Flies. And let's see if it tells me what record it's on. I see the single. Dang it. Yeah, I know there's a full length that is coming out soon. But yeah, this was released September 18th in 2020. And
It sounds pretty fucking good.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, Mark's still there. I don't know if he's still singing on this. I couldn't
It
tell.
sounds like it.
Yeah.
Unless he gets... there are bands like, Accept and, there's certain bands that like they keep, even if they get new singers, they sound basically like the same guy. So
Sure.
Or even Manila Road. Like Mark Shelton didn't sing live, for the last... No,
Really?
they had another... you never saw him, did you?
No, I never got a chance.
I saw him at Death Fest in 2013. I saw them and Pagan Altar the same year, which is pretty fantastic. But they've got what the fuck is his name? Patrick something. I'm friends with him on Facebook. Seems like a nice dude, but he was basically doing a Mark Sheldon-ish kind of delivery. But I think because Shelton's voice he sang so unconventionally, I think it kind of might have blown it out a little bit.
Yeah,
too.
I could see that kind of wearing and tearing on him. So we're going to end with those two tunes, the final song from the Sane Asylum, and then we're going to leap forward 32 years into the future. 32, yeah, because I'm 42. This is 88. I was born in 78. Oof. Yeah, there we go. But before we close out things here, I wanted to mention that we do have some new patrons that I want to sort of throw some credence out to. We have a new patron who wants to go by TBA. So, but we appreciate you, TBA, if you're listening for your monthly subscription. You're going to get access to that Flotsam and Jetsam show. So if you dig what we're doing with this thrash stuff, Flotsam and Jetsam, the first two records, we covered that on our first Patreon for the thrash special, including 20 other episodes prior to that, 15 probably. There's a couple years worth
there's a lot
of stuff there. So tons of access to special shows exclusive just to our patrons and stuff. We'll be doing 2 more patron shows of the thrash ilk as well. So if you're digging what we're doing, definitely join over on there. And then Thomas Gilliam, we appreciate you. You signed up right around Halloween, so right before we recorded, I think, the Violence show. And then we got another one. How did you come on? How did this guy contact us?
He just got a hold of us through, I think through Squarespace or something. But just wanted to do one time.
No?
Jay from Canada.
Jay from Canada.
And he just did a very generous one-time donation.
Yeah, very cool. And you can do that too. You know, if you want to get a hold of us, send us something through PayPal or a one-time donation. We're definitely down for that. But he did write us a cool letter, so I thought I'd read a little part of it. But he said, "Love the podcast. Hope this helps." For context, I live in Western Canada. I'm in my mid-30s. I grew up in the suburbs and found punk rock by pure accident. I accidentally listened. I love that. Or no, I admittedly listened to a lot of Fat Records and Epitaph bands marketed to kids like me. You know what? I like some of the Epitaph stuff, Bad Religion and some of those kind of things.
It's a good entry point.
I hung out with the metalheads in high school, but guess I, quote, wasn't ready for what they were listening to at that point. I was kind of on my own to stumble into my own musical taste, for better or for worse. It's been really interesting to listen to 2 lifelong pals talk about the genre that drew them together in the first place. I don't expect anything in return from this donation. Let's see. I've easily received more than this monetary amount in enjoyment from this podcast. See, there's a guy that gets it.
Value for value. Thank you very much. He
understands the sacrifice that we're doing, and we hope that you guys out there do. We think we're worth $5 a month, $2, $10 even.
Yeah.
Some of you who are all-stars like Andreas, $20 a month. I mean, woof.
Man.
Yep. My man.
That gets us, more and more
He's got
reference
his
material.
own episode coming up very soon. I'm sure. We got to get in touch with him when this thrash thing's done and be like, all right, dude, what do you want us to do? I will give a few ideas on what I have for what it's worth. My favorite episodes have always been the non-metal centric episodes. Allman Brothers, Slint, The Stooges, MC5, etc.
Never heard that from anybody else before, but we appreciate because we like to throw those out.
I love doing those. Yeah. I think there's more value. I was talking about it in the previous episode, last week's episode, about how I've discovered this new kind of punk podcast that Brian Wendorf recommended to me. And it's like, I never really would have spent time trying to understand Suicide. Like, I know them. I know some of their songs and stuff.
Yeah.
But, like, it's cool to like be forced to contextualize like a band that has a great meaning, but I don't have like my own desire to go and do the research on it. So like that's what we're doing. We'll go do the research on the Allman Brothers and bring in Allman Brothers experts and MC5 experts and Peter Green experts, and, all that kind of stuff. He says, probably due to me not being a metalhead, but appreciating the metalhead point of view. He said he loved, he's going old school, the Satanic Christmas offerings. And for our new listeners who might not have gone to our website, requiempodcast.com, if you go there, you can find the first 150 episodes there. And so...
no advertisements.
Yeah, no advertisements. Yeah. And early on, Mark and I would do some kind of holiday-themed episodes when we were still...
We did a Labor Day special.
Labor Day special is one of the most clever ones I think we did because it's all
pretty good.
Fuck you, boss, and anti-capitalism and stuff like that.
I am the working class and working man, and it's good.
Did a Halloween episode, predictably.
Yeah.
I think there are some probably pretty clever ones we still could put together. We could probably put together like a pagan metal, nature metal Arbor Day show. Think about that. That would be fucking, go back to nature and trees and shit like that.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, the Satanic Christmas Offering episode was basically where Mark and I each picked out 5 songs that we thought would maybe like stump the other person. But like songs that we liked, but it was like more like...
Yeah, we weren't playing like a weird R&B song.
Yeah, it was like shit like I knew that I probably was into that I never really shared with you and vice versa, you know? And the goal was to see if we could like, A, get each other to like the stuff, and B, like whether we could figure it out. Too. Yeah, that was kind of fun. And anyways, and he just says I'd love more Doom episodes, and an anarchist punk episode, Crass, Rudimentary Penny, Discharge, etc.
I think what might be a nice way to end or to come out of this thrash is to kind of go backwards a little bit and maybe do like an anarcho punk.
We could do an anarcho-punk show and maybe a crossover show.
Yeah.
I think that'd be kind of
Because I don't know if, like... I think I'd like to talk about Discharge, but I don't think the whole... You kind of get it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I think to get a cross-section of the whole thing would be more interesting, at least from where we're concerned.
And same with, like, crossover. You could get some Crumbsuckers and DRI, and you could kind of like what we did with the Greek stuff, where you throw, like, a cross-section together and stuff.
But just one episode.
Yeah. One of each would be kind of cool to capstone.
After 10 parts, you go with a nice palate cleanse.
Yes, absolutely. He said it'd be an episode on power violence, especially the band Spaz.
I don't really know anything about power violence.
Yeah, I don't either. But you know what? We've often not known a lot of shit that... Yeah. And then,
And it's a more contemporary subgenre, last 20 years or so.
Yeah. But
probably less than that.
Definitely interesting,
Yeah.
So...
thank you, Jay.
But we appreciate it, Jay. So... Like I said, if you want to become a patron, you can go to requiempodcast.com, and there is a Patreon tab that you can click on there that will take you directly to patreon.com, or you can just go to patreon.com/requiempodcast and sign up to be a Patreon and get access to all that cool stuff. If you want swag, we've got some swag, some shirts, and some shopping bags and other things that Mark has designed. Mark is...
I don't know if there's any cups. Is there any mugs or anything in there?
Oh, we used to have mugs. Because I've got like a mug.
Oh, they discontinued the... Yeah, maybe I'll look and see.
Yeah, we should see. Again. Mugs. Masks.
Yeah. I'm sure they have those.
Yeah,
yes.
we could get some COVID masks going.
We can put our faces on.
Hell yeah! Wouldn't you want just instead of our logo, it's just Mark and I smiling at people. Yeah. Really, really creep you out. But yeah, you can follow us on social media to get some kind of more updates. Jason and Mark is our tag on Facebook, and on Facebook there's all kinds of sub pages you can go to, including the History of Heavy Metal. You can like us on Facebook, as we have just a Requiem Metal Podcast kind of business sort of page. Twitter, Instagram, you can find us there at Podcast Requiem, and then I think it's Requiem Metal Podcast on Instagram as well. Leave us ratings on, always want to say iTunes. I'm just kind of in that mode, but it's Apple Music now, right? It's not.
I don't even know.
It's not really called iTunes anymore. It's the same thing, but
so I think
they dropped iTunes and they're just calling it Apple Music.
When they rolled out like their subscription shit, is that the same thing?
Yeah. So, but it's the same thing. So leave us a 5-star rating.
And you can't leave ratings or anything on Spotify, can you?
I don't think so.
But like add us to your playlists or something, so we pop up and.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not sure how the Spotify
because right now there's no ads on Spotify.
Yeah, exactly. If you want ad free, unfortunately we can't do anything about we don't get paid for those ads that you might get on other places. So
I mean, I would gladly put a Blue Cross Blue Shield ad in the front of this if they give me free health insurance.
Oh, now you're talking.
I'm all about that, but
So, this is fun. We should do this again.
Hey, maybe next week.
Yeah, why don't we do this again?
Same time, same table, 6 feet apart.
So we've got Metamorphosis of a Monster, which closes out 1988's The Sane Asylum, and then from 2020 we have Straight as the Crowbar Flies to end things here for Blind Illusion
with Kurt Weinstein.
Kurt what?
From Crowbar.
Oh yeah, now you got me. Oh my gosh.
All the head I gave.
He always looked really constipated in that video, and I just kind of felt bad for him.
Yeah. We always thought it sounded like he said, all the head I gave.
All the head I gave, yeah. I gained a better sense of appreciation for Crowbar when Down came out, and then I kind of went back in and listened to some other Crowbar records, and you know what? Pretty good.
It's okay.
Yeah, especially like those first few are pretty good. I mean, I don't need Crowbar records past 2000, but
yeah,
like the first like 3 or 4, yeah. There's one with like the heads that are kind of merged together. Kind of looks like that Trouble plastic green head kind of cover. It's like Odd Fellows, something rather. It's like their 3rd or 4th record. That's probably their best. But
Decibel put his solo record on their top 40 this year.
I heard a song or two off of it, like when I was listening to a random like Spotify playlist.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Like I said, I gain he's good. They're just kind of they're a goofy looking band sometimes.
Would never imagine that I would want to hear the singer of Crowbar's solo record.
Yeah, things surprise you. You never know. Look at this.
Sure, he's a nice guy.
Hey, look at you. You're listening to Blind Illusion.
Hey, that's different though.
Who knew?
I did see Crowbar when they played with Carcass and Night Demon. What a lineup that was.
Whoa.
I drove to Columbus to see that.
Why? That's a weird.
It's a very weird line. Yeah.
Is Crowbar a Nuclear Blast? Would that have been like a formation?
They might. No, because Night Demon's on Century Media. It was just a weird. That was the tour after Carcass did like the Off the Beaten Path random weird, because they toured Surgical Steel for 6 years.
Yeah, that's true. So then they did kind of like a weird.
Yeah, but that was because they did the Macabre. Fuck, who else was with it? Fucking poster that I did over there.
Oh, yeah.
Exhumed, and
that was the Decibel tour.
Obituary was too.
Oh,
well, that was a different one. Yeah, they did many. You missed most of the times they came through, except for the Decibel tour.
I saw them the first time they came through
with Mike Amott and the.
Yeah, that was
with Suicide Silence.
Oh God. And then we drove to Chicago.
That was the Decibel tour
to see Ben.
Yeah,
because when Ben was playing with Carcass,
that's why I went to Columbus as well.
Ben was there.
I hung out with him before.
Yeah. Shout out to Ben Ash. Hope to see you play with Satyricon soon. I was gonna see him this frickin' past summer in Las Vegas. Gonna have a beer with Ben out in Las Vegas. Satyricon was playing at Psycho Fest or whatever. So.
Well, check out his YouTube channel. I believe it's just Ben Ash.
Yeah,
he put out a solo song. Good stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Ben if he ever wanted to write us like a goofy, like quick, like theme song, like a jingle that we could throw in for some stuff. I just thought
wouldn't hurt.
It'd be kind of funny. It was like a marketing tool. Get in your head, because a lot of the podcasts I listen to have like a weird like jingle thing that like you're like, oh, I'm listening to this.
Well, my previous show. Mike did the jingle for me.
Mike
Johnston.
Oh, really?
It sounded like a Johnny Quest theme. It was pretty sweet.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can get Ben Ash and Mike Johnston together for like a weird jazz European metal fusion. It'd be kind of interesting.
Could work.
So, all right. So, anyways, for Blind Illusion and Thrash Extravaganza number 4, I'm Jason.
And I'm Mark.
Enjoy.
itself from its tomb of hibernation. He will sprout wings and fly. Man will be consumed by fire, then condemned to the sea, burning eternally with salty water in the lungs. Reborn, reformed, the humble will adorn the new wave without treachery or scorn.
I rebirth at every return inspection. As the goddess breathes life in every orifice and pore, I re-enter my body and I live once more. Something to grit out your ears and to sweat out your eyes when they throw the book at me, straight as the crowbar flies. 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 Now known as music born reside, I think that's another room singing natural soprano, in love with the sister of the mother of the church of the whore of Babylon. So take the grit out your ears and sweat out your eyes when they throw the book at me, straight as the crowbar flies. 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 life in every orifice and pore. I re-enter my body and I live once more. gonna sweat out your eyes when they throw the book at me, straight as the crowbar flies. Straight as the